The bustling streets of Washington, D.C. were abuzz with the latest legal shocker. Usha Vance, the wife of Vice President J.D. Vance, had been fined by a federal judge. But what made the case even more bizarre was the reasoning behind it. The judge had imposed the fine solely to test her legal prowess. The news broke like wildfire. Cable networks interrupted their regular broadcasts. Political analysts debated fiercely, and social media was flooded with theories. Was this an attack on the vice president's family? Or was there some hidden agenda behind the move? Usha, a Yale law graduate and a respected attorney in her own right, had built her reputation as a sharp legal mind. Her career had been defined by high-stakes courtroom battles, constitutional challenges, and advocacy for justice. But never before had she found herself on the other side of the bench. The controversy began when Judge Solomon Graves, a well-known but eccentric federal judge, issued a court order summoning Usha Vance for a legal dispute that had no precedent. The reason? A procedural fine of $50,000 for an alleged administrative oversight in a case she had handled years ago. The supposed violation was minor, and experts argued that no lawyer, let alone someone of Usha's caliber, would ever be fined for such a thing. Legal analysts combed through past cases and found that no other attorney had ever been penalized in this way. "This is personal," a CNN analyst speculated. "No, this is a challenge," countered a Fox News commentator. "It's an insult to our justice system," a former Supreme Court clerk raged on Twitter. Within hours, reporters camped outside the Vance residence, eager for a reaction. Would she accept the fine, fight back, or expose the judge's motives? Inside the vice president's residence, Usha sat calmly, reviewing the summons. JD paced the room. "This is ridiculous. A fine for what? Just to see if you can argue your way out of it?" He fumed. "It's a trap," Usha said, her voice steady. "But it's also an invitation." "An invitation to what?" She looked up, her eyes sharp with determination. "To prove I'm the best lawyer in the country." The next morning, she arrived at the courthouse, dressed in a navy blue power suit, her confidence radiating like a shield. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. But she ignored them and walked straight into the courtroom, ready for battle. Judge Solomon Graves sat at the bench, his expression unreadable. The room was packed with journalists, legal experts, and high-profile attorneys who had come to witness what promised to be the most unusual trial in modern American history. The judge's gavel struck. "Let's begin." As the courtroom settled into an expectant hush, Usha Vance stood tall at the defendant's table, her legal pad untouched. She didn't need notes, not for this game. Judge Solomon Graves adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Vance, the record shows that in 2018, while representing a corporate client in the Ninth Circuit, you failed to file an addendum within the designated 14-day window. This oversight, however minor, is grounds for a $50,000 fine under procedural law." Usha tilted her head slightly. "Your Honor, with respect, that statute applies only to cases where the oversight directly impacts the outcome. My client's case was ruled in their favor. No harm was caused." The judge's lips twitched. Was that a smile? "Ah, Mrs. Vance, you're correct that precedent leans in your favor. But, you see, I'm not merely concerned with precedent. I am concerned with precision." A murmur rippled through the gallery. This wasn't about a clerical mistake. It was personal. J.D. Vance, sitting quietly behind his wife, leaned forward. He knew Usha didn't need his defense, but his blood boiled at the spectacle. This was a power play in front of the nation. Usha, unfazed, responded with calm authority. "The law is not a stage for theatrics, Your Honor. If you seek to test my legal skill, why hide behind a fine? Let's dispense with the illusion and address the real matter at hand." For a moment, the judge said nothing. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the bench. Finally, he leaned forward. "Very well, Mrs. Vance. Let's test you properly. I propose a different kind of hearing, one where your legal genius will be on trial. If you succeed, the fine is erased. Fail, and you pay the penalty and accept public censure." The air grew electric. No one had heard of such an arrangement in modern legal proceedings. A duel of legal minds, out in the open. Without missing a beat, Usha responded. Accepted. State your terms. A flicker of admiration crossed Judge Graves' face. He wasn't dealing with an ordinary lawyer. You will argue 3 hypothetical cases of my choosing, each rooted in complex legal principles, but with no clear precedent. If you argue successfully for all 3, the fine is vacated. But fail just one and you pay. Are you ready? Usha's voice rang out, clear and steady. I was born ready. The courtroom stirred with excitement. This wasn't just a case. It was shaping into a high-stakes battle of intellect between 2 of the sharpest legal minds in America. Judge Graves opened a worn leather folder and extracted the first hypothetical. Case 1. Suppose an autonomous vehicle programmed to prioritize passenger safety faces an unavoidable collision. If it swerves left, it kills a pedestrian. If it swerves right, it crashes, killing the passenger. Who is liable? The software developer, the passenger who authorized the program, or the vehicle manufacturer? The room fell silent. It was a legal minefield, one that had no settled answer in American jurisprudence. Usha smiled. The game was on. She approached the podium and began, Your Honor, the heart of this question lies in the legal doctrine of foreseeability and agency. And with that, she dove into the argument, articulate, sharp, and relentless. Usha Vance adjusted the microphone and began her argument with the composure of a seasoned litigator. Your Honor, this case rests on 3 key legal principles: foreseeability, agency, and product liability. Let's start with the software developer. Her voice was smooth, deliberate, a surgeon dissecting a legal puzzle. Autonomous vehicle algorithms operate under pre-programmed decision matrices. Under current product liability laws, manufacturers are responsible for ensuring the reasonable safety of their products. However, software developers, while integral to the vehicle's function, are not the final decision-makers in how the vehicle is deployed. Holding them liable would stretch the definition of causality beyond legal reason. Judge Graves raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Usha pressed on. Next, the passenger. While they may select basic driving preferences, they cannot reasonably foresee or control edge case emergencies. Liability cannot be attributed to a user making a routine consumer choice. That leaves us with the manufacturer. She paused just long enough for the weight of her point to settle. Under the restatement, 3rd of torts, the vehicle manufacturer carries a duty to prevent foreseeable harm. In this scenario, the manufacturer has the clearest duty of care. While no algorithm can predict every possibility, the law still requires manufacturers to prioritize public safety. The liability, therefore, rests primarily on the manufacturer for failing to create a program that minimizes harm. A ripple of murmurs swept through the courtroom. She had struck her first blow. Judge Graves leaned forward. An interesting argument, Mrs. Vance. But what about contributory negligence? Does the pedestrian's decision to enter a hazardous area reduce the manufacturer's liability? Usha smiled faintly. Contributory negligence applies when the injured party assumes a known risk. But, Your Honor, a pedestrian crossing the street is not inherently assuming the risk of being struck by an AI-driven vehicle. The manufacturer's failure to account for basic pedestrian safety cannot be shifted to the pedestrian's ordinary conduct. The judge let out a low hum of approval. A fine answer. You've passed the first challenge. JD allowed himself a small, proud smile. 1 down, 2 to go. Without missing a beat, Judge Graves reached for the second case. Case 2. Imagine a journalist obtains classified government documents exposing corruption. Publishing the documents serves the public interest but violates national security laws. Does the First Amendment protect the journalist from prosecution? The room tensed. This was a landmine in the legal world, the collision between press freedom and national security. Usha's voice remained steady. Your Honor, this question lies at the intersection of free speech and national security, a conflict the courts have long wrestled with. She began pacing slightly, the rhythm of her words crisp and precise. The Supreme Court's ruling in New York Times Company v. United States established that prior restraint preventing publication is unconstitutional without evidence of direct, immediate, and irreparable harm. However, post-publication prosecution is another matter. She turned to face the judge directly. The First Amendment is not absolute. In cases where national security is genuinely threatened, the government may prosecute. However, for a journalist to be held liable, the government must demonstrate specific imminent harm, not vague or speculative risks. Judge Graves tilted his head. So, you're saying the journalist is protected? Usha's lips curved into a subtle smile. Not entirely. I argue that the public interest must be weighed against the risk. If the documents merely embarrass officials, the First Amendment shields the journalist. But if disclosure directly threatens military operations, prosecution is justified. In this scenario, the government bears the burden of proving that the disclosure meets the threshold of true national peril. For a moment, the judge said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. 2 for 2, Mrs. Vance. But the final case is where most fall. The courtroom buzzed. Usha remained still, a lioness waiting for her next prey. Judge Graves held up the third and final hypothetical. His voice grew colder. Case 3. A biotech company develops a gene-editing therapy that could eliminate hereditary diseases. However, the therapy is only affordable to the wealthy. Should the government mandate equitable access, or does the company retain the right to control distribution? A legal and ethical labyrinth. But Usha Vance was ready. She stepped back to the podium, her mind already weaving the argument together. This question requires us to navigate the tension between intellectual property rights and public welfare. And with that, she began her final and most dangerous argument. The air in the courtroom grew heavier as Usha Vance prepared to deliver her final argument. The stakes were clear: one wrong step and the fine would stand, along with public censure. She took a steady breath and began. Your Honor, at the heart of this case lies a conflict between corporate autonomy and public welfare. The government's role in regulating medical innovations must be balanced against the constitutional protection of property rights. Her voice was clear and commanding, the voice of a woman who had faced tougher battles and won. First, the biotech company's intellectual property is protected under the Fifth Amendment, which prohibits the government from taking private property without just compensation. Forcing the company to relinquish control over its gene-editing therapy would amount to a regulatory taking. Judge Graves' expression remained unreadable. He had heard similar arguments before, but Usha was just getting started. However, she continued, the Supreme Court has also recognized that the government may regulate private enterprise when public health is at stake. In Jacobson v. Massachusetts, the court upheld mandatory smallpox vaccinations, ruling that individual liberties can be limited to protect community welfare. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. So which side prevails, Mrs. Vance? Usha's lips curved slightly. She knew the answer lay not in choosing a side, but in blending both perspectives. Neither position is absolute. The government cannot seize intellectual property without due process, but it can impose reasonable conditions to ensure public access. I propose a solution grounded in existing precedent, a government-subsidized licensing model. The courtroom stirred. She wasn't just answering the question. She was rewriting the rules. Under this model, the biotech company retains ownership and profits from their innovation. Meanwhile, the government can negotiate fair compensation and ensure affordable access for lower-income patients. This approach preserves both corporate rights and public welfare, aligning with prior rulings like Penn Central Transportation Company v. New York City, where the court recognized that public benefit does not automatically negate private property rights. A faint smile tugged at the corners of Judge Graves' mouth. A clever compromise, he said, his voice softer now. But what about the argument that healthcare is a fundamental right? Shouldn't life-saving treatments be universally available? Usha nodded, prepared for the challenge. While the Constitution does not explicitly guarantee healthcare, the state has a compelling interest in preserving life. Congress already uses public funding to subsidize essential medicines through programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Extending this framework to emerging gene therapies is both legal and ethical without trampling the rights of innovators. The room buzzed with quiet awe. Usha had turned a theoretical minefield into a clear, pragmatic solution. For a moment, the judge said nothing, his fingers steepled, eyes narrowed. Then, with deliberate slowness, he set the case file aside. Mrs. Vance, you have argued 3 complex cases with precision, grace, and legal brilliance. I am satisfied. A charged silence filled the courtroom as he delivered his verdict. The fine is vacated. You have passed my test. A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery as reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Usha allowed herself a quiet breath of relief, but her expression remained calm. She hadn't done this for pride. She had done it because the law deserved integrity. Judge Graves leaned forward one last time, his tone softer. Few attorneys could withstand such scrutiny. I wanted to know if your reputation was earned. Today, you proved that it is. From the back of the room, J.D. Vance's eyes shone with pride as his wife reclaimed her place not just as the vice president's spouse, but as a legal titan in her own right. Usha gathered her papers and turned to leave, her head held high. She had not only won the judge's challenge, she had reminded the nation that justice, when pursued with brilliance and integrity, always prevails. As Usha Vance stepped out of the courthouse, the cold breeze brushed against her face, but her heart was warm with victory. Cameras flashed and microphones stretched toward her as a swarm of reporters crowded the steps. A voice cut through the chaos. Mrs. Vance, how does it feel to win against one of the toughest judges in America? Usha paused, her posture poised and graceful. This was never about winning or losing, she said calmly. It was about defending the principles of fairness and the rule of law. No matter who you are, whether a private citizen or the spouse of the vice president, no one is above or beneath the law. Her words struck a chord. For months, critics had whispered that Usha's success came from her husband's rising political stature. Today, she had shattered that narrative. She was not just the vice president's wife, she was a legal powerhouse in her own right. As she descended the courthouse steps, J.D. Vance emerged from the crowd. His warm smile cut through the tension, and when their eyes met, the weight of the day lifted. Without a word, he extended his hand. You never cease to amaze me, he murmured as she slipped her hand into his. Usha chuckled softly. Did you ever doubt me? He shook his head. Not for a second. The couple walked past the throng of media, each step a quiet statement. They were stronger together. Later that evening, in the quiet of their home, Usha settled into a leather armchair in the study. J.D. poured 2 glasses of bourbon, a small toast to a hard-fought victory. You know, he mused, handing her a glass, Judge Graves might have underestimated you, but I wonder if he did this to prove something else. Usha arched an eyebrow. What do you mean? J.D. leaned against the bookshelf, his tone thoughtful. Maybe this wasn't just about you. Maybe it was about the message he wanted to send to the public, to other judges. That the legal system still works, no matter how powerful or connected someone is. Usha sipped her drink, considering his words. If that's true, then I respect him even more. The law isn't about who you know, it's about what you know and how you apply it. A comfortable silence settled between them. In the background, the soft hum of the evening news played and Usha's name dominated the headlines. Legal genius Usha Vance stuns courtroom. Vice President's wife outmaneuvers judge's challenge. Usha Vance, a new legal icon? J.D. laughed softly. They're already calling you the next Supreme Court nominee. Usha rolled her eyes playfully. One battle at a time, J.D. But deep down, she knew today's case had changed things. Not just for her career, but for how America saw her. A week later, an unexpected letter arrived at their home. The embossed seal of the federal judiciary gleamed under the morning sunlight. Usha opened it carefully, her curiosity piqued. The handwriting inside was neat and precise. Mrs. Vance, I wanted to thank you for your remarkable performance in my courtroom. Your arguments were not only legally sound but also demonstrated a rare intellectual courage. I trust that you will continue to uphold the highest standards of our legal system. America is watching, and in you, they see hope. Sincerely, Judge Solomon Graves ***. For the first time since the trial, emotion swelled in Usha's chest. It wasn't just about proving herself. It was about restoring faith in the system. As she tucked the letter away, J.D. walked in, their young children trailing behind him, laughing and chasing one another. He smiled, seeing the letter. Another win? Usha smiled back. The most important kind, the one that reminds us why we fight for justice. In that moment, surrounded by family, she realized that her battle with Judge Graves wasn't just a test. It was a testament to the power of law, the dignity of truth, and the enduring belief that no one, not even a vice president's wife, is above the rules. And as long as Usha Vance had breath in her lungs, she would continue to defend those principles one case at a time.